This presentation is a really important topic, and it's where we spend our time as PMs because we need to move from being busy to being effective and rebalance our time because the amount of time that we spend at the time buffet on the wrong things is just not good. And so let me give you some quick context. PMs spend about 60% of their time on the work about the work, just doing the sort of the regular PM stuff, but not as much time on strategy, leadership, planning, and that results in burnout, missed deadlines, and frustrated teams. But more importantly, a recent study showed only 1 in 3 projects is successful. So this presentation is going to be about how we should be spending our time and give some practical tips about shifting our time to way higher impact work, which should give us way better results. So let's go into some of the studies that I referenced. Standish does a report every year called the Chaos Report that assesses thousands of projects. And every year the results are pretty much the same, which is about a third of projects are actually successful. About half are challenged and 20% just fail outright. And there's all sorts of causes. But what's interesting is the larger the projects, the higher the probability of failure. And as we all know, projects are getting more complex. They're getting larger, companies are investing more. So I expect this trend to continue. And it's our job, right? Our job is to deliver projects. So if our job is to deliver projects and we're successful a third of the time, then what does that say about us as a profession? The other interesting metric is the time that we spend at work. And Asana did a report called The Anatomy of Work, where they surveyed over 9,000 knowledge workers, and about 60% of the time was spent on just work about the work, just doing the regular stuff. And about a third, interesting, on what actually like the core job responsibilities are, and only 9% on strategic planning. And what happens with us as PMs is we get buried in coordinating and doing updates and maintaining deliverables and not on the planning or the leadership activities, right? The meetings and the status and just chasing people dominate our time, as well as all the manual reporting we do. And it hurts the project outcomes, right? If I correlate these two studies. And so, as I mentioned, our job is we are accountable for project success. And I think and there's lots of factors that go into that. But I think the biggest thing that we can control is where we spend our time. And therefore, the success means that sort of there's delivery, there's alignment, we've managed our risks. Our time is our most valuable resource. And where we spend it, I fundamentally believe has an impact on project health and the probability of success. So let me go into sort of the framework of how I think about where we spend time. And I put it into sort of 3 buckets. And these are not equally weighted, by the way, as you saw with the report, the Asana report. One is proactive time. That's looking ahead at things. It's preparing for meetings that are coming up and looking at upcoming milestones, looking for risks on the project and looking for ways to improve. The active time is where we spend most of our days, right? In meetings and filling out reports and monitoring and updating deliverables and, one-on-ones with teams and individuals. And then there's the reactive time, which just explodes during the day with fire drills or escalation, or even following up on open tasks and actions. I could have put this in the middle bucket, but I put it in reactive because to me it is reactive. If people did what they said that they would do, then that would be their active time, but instead they don't, so then we have to react. So again, I think about it in these 3 buckets of where we spend our time. And to drill into it a little bit, so the proactive time, as I mentioned, is about preparing for meetings. Do we have the right agenda? If we have a one-on-one, are we prepared with the things we need to get with that person? Are we ready to facilitate a meeting, or are there any materials that we need to prepare for or read in advance so that we come to really optimize the time that we're spending in the meeting? And then, look, our biggest tool is our project plan. So we should be spending proactive time looking at upcoming milestones and deliverables and thinking about, are these on track? Are there resources that are needed that we need to chase down? Are there dependencies we need to make sure are in place? What are the things we need to do to get ahead of our plan and make sure that our deliverables meet their milestones? Then there's assessing risks, right? Are there risks out there? Are there contingency plans and mitigations we need to think through? Stakeholder alignment is something that is absolutely an investment in time. And how do we ensure the alignment and even fostering relationships? I put that in this bucket, whether it's following up with people or just checking in on them and sort of building the relationship. To me, that is proactive time. That's an investment in time. And then there's improvements, right? Are there ways of optimizing or automating or improving? A lot of times we get caught up in the day to day and we don't think about how do we improve the effectiveness of our projects. So to me, this is all investment in time and looking ahead and thinking about how to sort of improve how we deliver. And look, it's high leverage time, but it's unfortunately it's often neglected due to all the other things. So then there's the active time, which is the core work, and that's things like running the meetings, right? And if you're a PM, then you spend a lot of time in status meetings and having topical one-off conversations and stand-ups and one-on-ones. Then there's attending all the meetings, right, on the same thing, risks and issues and so on. Then there's all the work we have to do to track the multiple deliverables we have as PMs, right? The plan, the RAID log, financial models, things like that, keeping those things maintained. And I would actually argue a lot of PMs are not good at keeping these maintained and fall more into the reactive category. But for purposes of this conversation, I'm going to assume that this is in the active bucket. And then there's all the various communications and updates that we have to give. It's necessary time, but it can be optimized. There's ways of improving how much time we spend on these things. And then finally, there's the reactive time. That's the urgent issues that arise. Again, if you've been on more than one project, you know what these are: escalations or resource challenges, or there's some defect in the system that has to rally everybody around it, generally on a Friday or Saturday. There's always executive requests coming in from a senior manager or leader that, do this analysis or generate this thing or make me this PowerPoint presentation. Sometimes there's reworking deliverables when changes come up and there's misalignment and you have to sort of redo work. And then I mentioned chasing down people, one of my least favorite things, but we have to do it to keep things running. And look, it's the time that interferes with the other work as it tends to take priority, but it's a reality of projects that we need to recognize. So there's a bunch of costs of misallocated time. First is sort of the proactive time gets squeezed out. We don't spend the time doing the proactive things that we should. And then the reaction becomes the default. It sort of creates this cycle of if you're not being proactive, then things get missed, which led you to be more reactive. And we lose strategic visibility. Team morale suffers from constant fire drills, and I do believe being prepared helps minimize the impact of fire drills. Stakeholders lose trust because it feels like, as PMs, we're not on top of things, and then we lose credibility. And then work just isn't done, right? Things fall off lists or don't get followed up on, or it's done poorly. We talked about sort of burnout as well. And ultimately, the projects drift off course, either because we're not on top of things, we didn't chase things down, there were issues that festered for too long, team members got annoyed and left. So there's lots of reasons, but it all comes down to, I think, the misallocated time. And so let me give you 5 recommendations on how to improve where you spend time at the buffet. And we'll talk about each of them. Automating and streamlining as much as possible, looking to delegate and empower, rethinking about the meetings. We spend way too much time in meetings. And how do we prioritize that proactive time? And then building strategic habits. So, on automating and streamlining, the good news is now AI is everywhere. There's so many things we can use AI for. Generating reports. The current program I'm on has 7 different status reports. We create one and then draft the other 6 using AI. So that's, time not spent recreating content. Other ways of automating dashboards and progress tracking, or set up alerts, right, when risks come up, are the ways to sort of get a trigger, a notification in your project management software that tells you that something's there. Using templates and for meeting preparations and other things, so that you're not starting with a blank piece of paper when you create a deliverable, and freeing up that time for strategic thinking. Again, so you just want to have this mindset of how do I automate, optimize, streamline as much as possible so that you're spending your time on the more impactful things. Then the second recommendation is around delegating and empowering, right? And this means you don't have to necessarily do everything. You can assign ownership of deliverables. You can empower the team leads maybe to run the updates or make the presentations. Trusting your team to escalate the issues to you, right? So that you can sort of divide and conquer, which requires having clear roles and responsibilities of who's doing what. Make sure you're not micromanaging. I mean, you want to understand the details, but if you're spending your time on that, then you're not spending your time on other things. Where you should be spending spending your time is removing the roadblocks from the team and building that culture of accountability so everybody on the team feels accountable. And when you micromanage, it's actually the exact opposite, is people feel like, well, they're not going to take accountability because that's just on you to do. Then rethink the meetings. I talked about some weeks I have 70 or 80 meetings in a week. And so looking at the calendar and saying, are there meetings with no purpose that I can cancel? Can I delegate or offload things to other people? Can something just be an email instead of a meeting? Are there redundant meetings that you can combine? Maybe declining the ones that aren't critical, and block time off. I literally block time off to work and to respond to things so that they're not just stacked meetings and we become professional meeting attenders. um, and I mentioned AI is a great tool for this, especially with Copilot that has transcription. You can actually ask the transcription to give you the bullets, and you can ask it questions after you've left the meeting. And so you can sort of get a sense of what the meeting was about without even having to be there or follow up with anybody. Then prioritizing this proactive time. I talked about blocking off the time every morning from like 7 to 9 a.m. I just have blocked off, and I'm just looking ahead at the day, and I'm thinking about the meetings that I'm in, and I'm seeing what I need to follow up on, and have a checklist. Hey, every week I got to look at my risks and I got to look at my milestones. And I actually put this checklist on my PM's calendars. I send it as a calendar invite, and don't forget to look at the roster and all this kind of stuff. Reviewing the risks and dependencies, preparing updates, building contingency plans. All of this is, again, prioritizing the time and reflecting on it. And you want to treat it as sacred and really plan for it and take the time. Don't just put it on the calendar, but actually take the time. And then finally is building strategic habits. Start each day with a priority review. What are the habits you need to get into? And look, everybody has a different style. So, I have in the bottom here to know what works for you. But maybe it's block off time for a priority review. Maybe it's blocking off the end of the week for a reflection in the car ride home, or, go for a walk. But be conscious of the time that you're spending in each of those categories. And are you spending too much reactive time and not enough proactive time? And make this strategy part of your rhythm. So again, you just have to do what sort of works for you and try some different things out. Because look, time is our superpower. So here's my new plate now. I don't think we'll spend that much time on proactiveness, but you get the point, is that projects fail when we're stuck in reactive mode. And success requires that we spend the time being proactive. And most PMs spend way too much time on sort of the day-to-day and reacting. And we have to shift more towards planning, looking at risks, aligning stakeholders, all of the things that'll help our projects be successful. And the good news is with AI and other ways, there's lots of tools that we can use, delegate, use those habits to rebalance your time, because the time spent wisely means your projects are delivered successfully. I really hope that you think this was a wise use of time, and put some comments in here with other techniques that you think I might have missed. And thanks for watching.